Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. Now, although we release these messages on a given date, people don't always listen to them or watch them on that date. So they're broadcast on radio stations, people access them through YouTube. So sometimes people might be watching or listening to a message days, weeks, or even years after it's first published online. But today, when we're publishing this message, 2nd of January, is our first Take 5 of 2023. And also, 2nd of January is, in the United States, National Science Fiction Day. Now, you might not have known there was such a thing as a National Science Fiction Day, but there is. And the reason it's set for the 2nd of January is that was the birth date of one of the greatest science fiction writers of all time, Isaac Asimov. Wrote the robot novels, and if you've seen the movie I, Robot with Will Smith, that was based on one of Isaac Asimov's novels. I read many of his books as a child. I was into science fiction. And you know what? Science fiction, I understood as a child, it was not fantasy. It was not about stuff that was impossible. It was dreaming about what was theoretically possible. That's the whole point of science fiction. And indeed, much of what we encounter in our daily lives today was science fiction when I was a child. The whole idea of the internet and smartphones, that was science fiction. The idea that you could pull a phone out of your pocket and you could immediately put money into your bank, spend money out of your bank account. You could just look something up. If you didn't know the lyrics to a song, you could just pull a device out of your pocket and instantly Google it and find what the lyrics were. This was all impossible. But today it's part of our daily lives, and that's how science fiction is supposed to work. Now, we're seeing things happening even in the last few weeks, which until now were part of science fiction. Nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion is a staple of science fiction novels about having this clean, reliable, limitless, and very cheap form of energy. But it's always seemed like a pipe dream. But in the last few weeks, scientists in the United States have achieved nuclear fusion. Now, it's got a long, long way to go, and probably isn't going to happen in my lifetime unless something else happens. Science fiction, the kind of science fiction stuff that enables me to live longer than a normal human lifespan. But it's on the way. Now, here's the thing. Christians also dream about what is possible. You see, fantasy fiction, yeah, that's the impossible, but science fiction is about what is possible. And we as Christians, we're not supposed to fantasize about things that are never going to happen anyway, but we are supposed to dream about what is possible and what God can do for us. And C.S. Lewis was one Christian thinker who really saw that science fiction had a potential for sharing the gospel. In fact, there is a whole category of Christian science fiction now, and we could really say that C.S. Lewis probably started that off. He actually spoke in a letter to a friend about his science fiction novels that they were smuggling theology into people's hearts. In other words, people would read a science fiction novel, and yet he was putting biblical truths into them that people would then grasp. It's a preparation for them hearing the gospel. Now, he wrote particularly what's known as his C.S. Lewis's space trilogy. That was 3 novels: Out of the Silent Planet, Voyage to Venus, and That Hideous Strength. And I would thoroughly recommend that you read these books if you can get hold of them. They're certainly available, I know, on the Amazon Kindle very cheaply. And basically, they deal with Christian themes. They deal with the origin of sin and innocence and temptation. For example, they go like to another planet, and it's like if Adam and Eve, when they were tempted, had actually resisted that temptation, what would have happened next? Would they have just kept on being tempted until they finally caved into it? Or would God put a stop to the temptation? And also in those novels, there are supernatural beings that are angels and demons. And C.S. Lewis made a really interesting speculation as well, in that the angels, he said, had sometimes been worshipped by people, but they didn't want to be worshipped, and yet people had misunderstood them. And he actually dared to suggest in his books that all the Roman and Greek goddesses and gods were actually mangled versions of where people had started worshipping angelic beings that were really there to serve God and to prepare the way for the coming of Jesus Christ. So C.S. Lewis, I mean, an incredibly gifted Christian thinker. He was a great gift to the Christian church. And yet he used science fiction as a way of spreading the gospel. I believe that God can use so many ways to share his truth. You know what? You might not be a preacher, but you may be a writer. You may be somebody who can dream. Maybe you can dream of what is possible through God. Who knows? There may be another C.S. Lewis out there waiting to be discovered. May God bless you today in Jesus' name, and join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.